Exile, Obsession, and Fury. By 1982, Father Niall Bresnahan was eager for his exile to end. Not that he had ever been one to complain, but 12 years was a long time, especially 12 years in Dubuque. In 1970, Niall Bresnahan had been dismissed from the faculty of Catholic University in Washington, itself a form of exile for a man with a first class in philosophy from Oxford and a doctorate in patristics from the Lateran, after he implied in a radio interview that Giovanni Battista Cardinal Montini, the former Archbishop of Milan, had been a lifelong member of the Italian Communist Party. The American Catholic bishops, excessively liberal at the time, had tried to send Bresnahan to an inner-city hospital in Philadelphia, there to do penance as a humble chaplain, but he reached out to certain friends in Rome who intervened and found for him a position in the Archdiocese of Dubuque as censor librorum and vice-rector of the cathedral. He was very grateful for the intercession and made the most of his new home. In Iowa, Father Niall Bresnahan took up the game of golf and learned, to his pleasant surprise, that Middle Americans found his accent charming and his politics invigorating. On the fairway, men of substance and achievement would confide to him their growing estrangement from a church in which the celebration of Holy Mass increasingly resembled the meetings of a socialist cell or a spaced-out drug party, or both. Bresnahan reminded them of a more spirited branch of Catholicism, eager submission to authority, long hours in the polio ward, narrow escapes from Marxist rebels at African mission schools, and, most revivifying of all, connections with like-minded cardinals in Rome. Soon an offer of financing was presented to him over drinks at the country club bar. He took the money with a handshake, bought his friends a round of his favorite aperitif, and the next day established Burke and Benedict Books, Libertas per Obsequium, as a platform for the neglected voices of conservative Catholics. If the liberal Catholic bishops of the early 1970s had thought that Father Niall Bresnahan could be silenced by dispatching him to Dubuque, they were sorely mistaken. His own prolific pen supplied the early catalog of B&B books, lean and flashy songs, the misuse of Vatican II in America, 1970, Learning the Suscipiat, The Struggles of an Irish Altar Boy, 1971, and Non Serviam, The Contraceptive Mentality in Modern American Life, 1972, all appeared within 3 years of that fateful golf outing. In early 1973, Father Bresnahan, sensing that his own well might soon run dry, asked himself the key question every entrepreneur must ask: what does the market want? It occurred to Bresnahan that the 22 women in his employ, every one of them a practicing Catholic, and all indefatigable in their reading habits, might constitute an almost perfect sample of his target audience. His investigation was simple and shrewd. He asked his employees what mattered to them as readers, as Catholic women readers. Now, Bresnahan knew little of women, aside from sharing his bed at a mission in Angola with his housekeeper, a sin for which the Cardinal Patriarch of Lisbon had granted him a dismissive absolution, and he was surprised at the enthusiasm of his employees' response. Bresnahan quickly discerned a pattern that a woman's lifetime love of inspirational reading always began with the intense literary appetites of a prepubescent Catholic girl. From that insight, Marcellina's bookshelf was born, taking its name from the older sister of St. Ambrose, a consecrated virgin homemaker who had been the favorite female saint of an adolescent Niall Bresnahan. As for himself, he had learned more about Catholic women than he really wanted to know, so he quickly delegated the management of the new imprint to his staff and returned, refreshed, to his putter and his polemics. His next book, The Feel-Good Trap, How the Pursuit of Pleasure Leads to Despair, 1974, sold nearly as well as the second edition of Warrior Daughter Saint. Yes, 12 years was a very long time. By 1982, Father Niall Bresnahan was more than ready to assume what he believed to be his rightful place in the ecclesiastical hierarchy, a prefecture in Rome, in a curia growing more conservative by the day, where his talents could best serve the Church and protect her from her own worst elements. Late that year, Niall Bresnahan finally did receive his long-awaited transfer. Unfortunately, his destination was not Rome, but Dublin. He had been assigned as personal secretary to the Most Reverend Gaetano Alibrandi, the papal nuncio, the Pope's ambassador to the Republic of Ireland. Gaetano Alibrandi was a troublesome figure who was rumored to be an ally of the Provisional IRA, and who himself had once served as a personal secretary to the same Giovanni Battista Cardinal Montini, later Pope Paul VI, whom Niall Bresnahan had once publicly accused of being a communist. The assignment could hardly be regarded as successful. The papal nuncio refused to speak to his new aide, referring to Bresnahan as Ratzinger's dog, and il fantoccio di Escrivà. When it became clear that he would have no official duties to perform in Dublin, and that his allies in the Curia now regarded him as a failure, Father Bresnahan decided to devote himself to the facilitation of real estate deals. When he died in 1987 of a heart attack in a golf course bar, his principal place of business, his personal bank account contained almost 20 million Irish pounds. His last will and testament, dated 1966, bequeathed his entire estate to a mission school in Angola, a school which by the late 1980s, after more than a decade of civil war, no longer existed, at least not in any legal sense, giving rise to decades of litigation. After the departure of Father Bresnahan, the Archdiocese of Dubuque had taken control of Burke and Benedict Books and then shut it down as quickly as possible. 7 of the 21 remaining employees were able to find work in local parishes, and the rest received 2 weeks of severance pay. By this point, Nora Eunice Magliano was no longer working in the office, but she had been receiving a monthly check, roughly equivalent to her old typist wages, drawn against the royalties from her book sales. Father Bresnahan had described this arrangement as a wise tax strategy, and had referred at least once to a nest egg of tens of thousands of dollars that was waiting for Nora Eunice. Unlike most of her old co-workers, she received no communication from the Archdiocese when the publishing house closed. Her checks simply stopped coming. She submitted a claim for unpaid royalties, and 1 month later she found herself attending a very confusing creditors' meeting in the federal courthouse. During the long and complicated bankruptcy procedure that followed, Nora Eunice learned that, for the previous 3 years, her monthly checks had actually been considered advances. As she had struggled to finish the novel she considered her masterpiece, A Seance for Socialism. In this novel, a mystical romance set in 1892, the American socialist Eugene Debs leads 6 members of the Fabian Society on a riverboat journey up the Mississippi from New Orleans to St. Louis. His British guests include George Bernard Shaw, H.G. Wells, Havelock Ellis, Frank Padmore, Edward Peace, and Sidney Webb, who is very lonely as he is traveling without Beatrice, his tender life partner. On the riverboat, the 7 socialist men meet a voluptuous woman with long, dark, curly hair, to whom they refer among themselves as the Creole, the Italian, the Greek, the Gypsy, and La Irlandesa Negra. This woman invites, or challenges, Debs and the Fabians to attend a séance, during which the voluptuous dark woman miraculously converts them all to Catholicism. By 1983, according to a document filed with the bankruptcy court, A Seance for Socialism had accrued royalties sufficient to earn out its advance, but Nora Eunice learned from courthouse gossip that instead of resuming her paychecks, the Archbishop of Dubuque was planning to revoke the nihil obstat that Father Bresnahan had bestowed on her novel, and to send the remaining inventory to the pulping tanks. In fact, under the proposed resolution of the bankruptcy case, every one of her books, including Warrior Daughter Saint and all the lives of the saintly martyred women, would go out of print and remain out of print. Her sources at the courthouse told Nora Eunice that the Archbishop would never allow her to seek other publishers. So bitterly did His Excellency resent Father Bresnahan and his back-channel connections to Rome. She appealed to several of Father Bresnahan's country club friends, asking for legal help, but those men had long been suspicious about her relationship with Father Bresnahan. They ignored her. She tried to teach herself contract and bankruptcy law, and in the process stopped writing. Or to be exact, she stopped writing fiction and instead applied herself to the daily composition of long letters to the bankruptcy trustee, demanding explanations of legal word usage, such as just what exactly did the words assume, reversion, and executory mean in a typical convoluted sentence. As her obsession with the case grew, she gained back nearly all the weight she had lost 9 years earlier, and then lost it again, very rapidly. Nora Eunice Magliano died unexpectedly in August 1984 of a bulimic seizure. Her funeral would prove to be the last occasion at which the 9 Larkin sisters, her mother and her 8 aunts, would gather together in good health. Returning to Florence after her niece's funeral, Sister Eunice Larkin suffered a stroke, possibly triggered by changes in air pressure in the landing jet, which rendered her unable to speak for the last 7 years of her life. Her disability meant that 1 year later she had to watch in silent fury as the Sinsinawa Dominicans sold the Villa Chiffonoya and closed the graduate school. She was also unable to halt the transfer of La Maschera di Oblio to the Etruscan Museum at the Vatican, an institution with a misogynist staff that she had battled for years. At the Vatican, the unrestored bronze mask was deemed bruta y de seconda categoria, It was placed in storage, and the interpretation of its vidual function offered by Sister Martin de Porres in the 1968 article was quietly forgotten. Beatrixie Fausta, Ph.D., might have recognized a citation to the article if she had ever encountered one, but she never did. After Sister Eunice died in 1991, her papers were shipped to Rosary College in suburban Chicago, a project that was funded by several of her surviving sisters.